Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to a new In the Studio video. This time I'm explaining, finally, our most popular track on Spotify ever with, I think, with over 25 million streams, right?
Even more, I think.
26 million, maybe even 27 million. It's a track I did back in, let's check it out. I started this project on the 13th of January 2015. So it's a really old one, which is also the reason why I haven't made this video yet, because this project was made in FL Studio 10 with a lot of old compressors, old VSTs, old samples. So it took me a really long time to find it back on my old laptop where I used to produce on, then make sure all the plugins were not corrupted, that all the samples were not corrupted. But now I'm here with a slightly different version of the original project, because I had to change all the plugins and stuff. But yeah, here it is, finally, our project. So maybe I should start with telling you guys how this project came to be. I was talking with the A&R of Spinnin Records, and he told me that he still had the parts of Finally by Sessa Peniston lying around. So that means the vocal, like not the original vocal, but a re-sung vocal, the piano and the bass. So this one, and this one, and this one. Well, that one. He all had that lying around from an earlier track by Bart Beemore and Oliver Twist, and he told me you could go ahead and try something with it. So that's what I did back in 2015. And immediately, if you look at the project right here, you can see that the project is really small. There's literally 1 till 17. There's 17 tracks going on with still a lot of space in between them. So it's one of my emptiest projects ever, I think. Also, yeah, note that it's been made in 2015, so I used to produce in a way different way that I'm producing right now. And if we go back to the project info right here, you can also see that I only spent about 10 till 11 hours on it. So that makes it one of my, I think, quickest projects ever. And I think that's pretty cool to see, because if you compare this project screen I have in front of me right now to a project I make nowadays, you can really see that I complicated it for myself over the years. And as you can see, maybe that's not really necessary, because this project, which is our most successful project, is also one of the emptiest projects. So less is more is a true statement yet again. What you also notice, if I zoom in a little bit on the project here, is that there's no other ideas. This idea right here, this pattern, that's the only solid idea I had. And normally with these kind of videos, I go through all the other ideas I had before the final idea. But that was not necessary here, because there were none. Except for one, actually. There was one other idea, and I'll just show it to you guys. It's this one. So that's the other idea I had, and immediately after I came up with this idea. Which obviously became the final idea. And again, nowadays I would probably make 10, 20 other ideas before really pinning on that final idea. But I think back in the days, I was just happy with this one, and I just continued producing the further track with this idea in mind. So how did I come up with this melody? Well, it's been a long time ago, but I think my process nowadays is still the same as back then. And that is just, removing the idea or removing anything that's happening in the drop, except for the drums maybe, and maybe part of a vocal, and then just literally taking up your phone, walking around in your living room and just making up melodies that will fit with that build-up. So in this particular case, I already had the piano, the vocal, the bass here in the break. I made a build-up, which I'll go into a little bit later in this video, and I completely made the track until the drop, and I just played this part on repeat. With phone in hand. That's literally what I did. And you make a couple of ideas. Then I returned to FL Studio and I created a new project. I created a new pattern, called it melody or main bass 1, I usually call it. And then I just started listening to the individual melodies that I had and started drawing them in here. So I did that for a couple of melodies, and then just picked one that I really liked and removed the rest, and that's what this final melody was. So that's how I came up with the melody. I haven't changed that way of creating melodies, so I still do that every day when I come up with something I think is cool. And it could be the tiniest things, it could be little vocal hooks, it could be really small tech house basses, from full-on to full-on melodies, it could be anything. As long as you record it, because else it's just something in your head, it's nothing physical. Another disclaimer, by the way, to this project, because it's so old, you probably are going to hear some clicks and clacks every now and then, so I don't mind those. But yeah, let's just listen to the intro right here. And as you can see, part of the intro is really empty. The only thing that's making this intro memorable is the part of the vocal chop right here, which is something that's also in the original by Sessa Peniston. It's just literally a kick with a close hi-hat loop and a clap and that vocal chop. And a lot of times I see producers really overproducing their intros, and that's not really the thing of an intro or an outro. It should be minimal so that other DJs can easily mix in your track into another track. And I think in this particular intro, this is a really solid intro, which is memorable, but also really easy to mix in. Then later in the intro, you can see right here that there's another part of the vocal coming in. And this whole part right here is just kind of introducing the first break, I think, because the piano is already in here. The DJ had these 30 seconds to mix in the track. If we mix in this track in our sets, it's always we loop this part, we then bring in the kick in this part, and then the other track is already faded out in this part. So if you're struggling with making intros, just think of how a DJ would mix in your track. What could he loop? What part could he take from the intro to repeat and to morph it into the mix without it sounding too hectic or with too much melodies or something. So one of the benefits of working on this track was that I already had the entire break. You know, the break is literally the piano, which is from the original from Sessa Peniston, the vocal from Sessa Peniston, and later on the bass, which is also cloned from the original. And the only thing I added was a snap later on.
Finally, it has happened to me, right in front of my face. My feelings can't describe it. Finally, it has happened to me, right in front of my face, and I just cannot hide it.
So I think that's also one of the reasons that this project didn't take that long, because, you know, one of the most important parts of the track was already made. Of course, I had to create everything around it, so one of the most iconic things of this track, I think, and also the reason why it works so well on the dance floor, is because of this insane build-up. So what makes this build-up so iconic, I think, is, well, A, it's pretty long, but also the elements that are in it. We have the last part of the piano being repeated. Then we have a part of the vocal which is being repeated.
Cannot hide it. Finally, oh yeah.
Then we have the snares. Oh, then we have the snares. With the riser, altogether, it's just one big clusterfuck of different elements. And then even later on, there's another instance of a vocal coming in. Which for me is a surprise that that worked, because normally two vocals on top of each other, that doesn't work, but in this case it does. So, of course, the riser here is pitching up, which is fairly common. I think it's silent, right? Yeah. Just some presets, which is being pitched up. I think 24 semitones in total. Yeah, it goes from -12 to +12. Which is also a pretty big change in pitch, so that I think that really adds to the crescendo effect of the build-up. Yeah, if we then go to this second vocal right here, one of the most important parts of making sure that this drop fits in with the break is this part of the vocal right here. So we have the last shout just before the drop, and then we have this little repeating part, which kind of hovers around the drop. And if we didn't have that part, the drop would A, sound really empty, but B, it would be really disconnected to the entire idea of the track. You know, the entire idea of this track was that it was kind of an homage to Sessa Peniston's Finally. And if you just, you know, remove the vocal right here, it would just be, you know, two parts, like a mashup in some sorts, or, a bad mashup. So yeah, this repeating part right here, it's really important. And a way to create that is to throw your vocal in slide sax, which I've already done in a ton of other videos. But yeah, I can do it again real quick. So what you would do is load up an instance of slide sax or any kind of slicing plugin. You throw in the vocal. and you slice it up, and you make it shut up, and then it starts slicing, and then you just literally look for a part. You don't even necessarily have to do this into a slicing VST, but you just simply look for a part which you like, and you take this one, for example. I'm just screwing around right here. You take this one and you copy it. You take that, something like that, you add a side chaining effect or something, and you're already there. And sometimes there's not really a part in the vocal that repeats well or sits well as a hovering channel over your drop. What you can do then is use pulse stretch. And pulse stretch is also a pretty common, popular technique. Normally to create like ambient sounds, but it also works really well for this kind of stuff. So you also have VST options for it, but I personally don't use that. I always use Audacity for that. And if I load up the vocal, and you can just search for a part that you think sounds nice if it would be repeated.
To me right in front of my face, and I just can't hide it.
Okay, maybe this part. You take that, you select it all, and you apply pulse stretch. If you don't know Audacity, by the way, you can just download this for free. It's, I think, the best free audio editing tool out there. So, as you can hear, what pulse stretch does is it insanely stretches out the sound, but it doesn't give that kind of metal-y effect. If you would normally stretch something out in FL Studio, it kind of fills out the gaps that are created if you stretch something out. And how FL Studio deals with that is by creating those metal-y sounding artifacts, but pulse stretch kind of smoothens that out or something, which makes it sound better. So obviously this is not really a good example, but if you would go through your vocal track with this effect applied, you can easily find something that would sit well in a hoovering kind of way over your drop. So another funny trivia thing about this track is that the break snare, this break snare is actually the standard snare you get when you start up FL Studio for the first time. So that's like it says snare basic as well. So I think that's pretty funny that I use that. It sounds good, so why not? So unfortunately, because this is such an old project, I can't exactly remember how I made these sounds. But yeah, I can just go to the individual sounds and try to think how I thought back then. So one of the most important parts of this melody is, you wouldn't say it, but this bass tap right here. Because that bass tap is literally filling that void that is there at the beginning of this melody. And if I think when I created this melody first, I had it in my mind like this. So that's the same sound as the bass. So I thought that was kind of confusing. So I really needed a different sound there instead of the same bass sound. So that's why this sound is there. And if we go to the actual sounds, you can see that it's made in massive. And all these sounds are made in massive except for one sample-based sound right here. And this sounds actually pretty interesting because for some people it would sound like there's a chorus effect over this sound. And they're not wrong, but also maybe a little bit. Because you can see here at oscillator 1 and 2 that the oscillators are detuned. This first oscillator is minus 30 cents from a whole octave. If you don't know Massive that well, with these parameters you can change how the sound pitches. So this is a standard pitch. So normally you would say that these two sounds would be out of tune with each other. And if you have a sharp ear, you can also hear that they are not really in tune with each other. But what's funny is if you're using the same oscillator as I'm doing right here, they're both woody oscillators, they kind of fight with each other. They are, yeah, how would you say it? It's basically the same as a chorus effect, but it's not actually a chorus effect. So that's a pretty weird technique, which gives it a certain sound which isn't exactly chorus, but does sound like it. And yeah, I think it's one of the most iconic sounds of this track. And it's also pretty UK bass oriented, I think, which also gives the drop a cool vibe, I think. So that's what's going on with the bass step. If we then continue, you can see here that we have the bass itself. Maybe I should just mute it. So all those sounds together make up for the first part of the drop. So even for young 2015 Wezol, I think you can already see that there's some layering going on here, which I was quite impressed with when I opened this project again. And yeah, as you can see here, if we listen to the lead, the layering is also quite important for the sound. So I also did it for a reason. And yeah, if we go to all these individual sounds, you can see that I think, especially here, they're all just copies of one another with different oscillators. I think that's a really easy way to layer your sounds, because you already have a pretty good basic sound, and the only thing you want to achieve by layering it is making it sound fuller. So an easy way to do that, of course, is then to just copy that instance of Massive or Silent or whatever and change the oscillator so that the sound is not completely different, but it does add to the fullness and richness of your sound. If we go to the processing, you can see that this is pretty much a joke. Like when I started this project up, after all that time, I was, yeah, surprised that the sound was still sounding okay in my ears with that amount of processing on it. So unfortunately, I had to change some stuff here because I didn't have the original VSTs on this computer. But there was initially only a isotope ozone tree on this channel. And you can do a lot in that VST, but there was no compression or something going on, or any compression going on the lead bus, for example. So that was quite surprising to me. And yeah, I threw some on here so that the project sounded somewhat okay. But yeah, that was a surprise to me. And I think that's also one of the biggest learning points of this video, which was also a learning point for me, actually, because nowadays I spend way more time on a project because, well, I think there's a couple of reasons. one of the reasons was when we released this track, we weren't doing this for a living yet, and nowadays we do. So there's more baggage onto my back to create something that is of a good quality, you know. I think back in the days, back in 2015, we were just more screwing around instead of, you know, always trying to create a quality track. But still, one of the learning points for me for this track was that sometimes you should just go with one of the first ideas you have, because maybe there's a reason that that idea came to your mind at first, you know. Maybe that means, like, if you're making up melodies and you're coming up with a certain melody, maybe you should use that melody because that one is the one that clicked with you naturally when you first started creating melodies. So the project is pretty basic, and so are the drums. If we go to the actual drums, kick, close hi-hats, clap, open hi-hat with clap. They're not really that interesting, but they're solid. If you're a university patron or higher, you get these samples. So we're gonna make a post after uploading this video where you can download all those samples. So go check that out. Oh, there's also this loop, by the way. So yeah, go check that out. So I think the biggest learning point, at least for me, is that I don't have to overcomplicate projects so much. You know, sometimes I literally spend more time creating ideas than I spent in this entire project. And sometimes you should just listen to your gut, go with your gut. That's it. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun. And I hope to see you again in another video.